It was just another day at the airport. Flights came and went as they usually did. The skies were clear, the weather was good. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Suddenly, a plane appeared out of the blue on the radar. It was not part of the scheduled flights, and it wasn't sending out any distress signals either. As the plane came into sight, everyone froze. What kind of aircraft was that? Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest video. Today we're going to tell you the story of a plane that mysteriously disappeared, only to reappear 37 years later. Before we delve into this mystery, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and click on that bell icon so you never miss any of our exciting stories. In 1985, a tabloid named Weekly Report ran headlines on a plane that vanished in 1955, landing 37 years later. The article even included an account of an eyewitness, and they ran this story several times. The plane in question was Pan Am Flight 914. On July 2nd, 1955, Pan Am Flight 914 took off from New York. The flight had 57 passengers and 4 crew members headed to Miami, Florida. It was clear weather and nothing was out of place. Little did the passengers know that this was going to be a very long flight. The flight took off in due course and everything was calm. The passengers were settling into their seats. For the crew members, it was just another day in the skies. The ground staff were already on to the next flights that came and went. Suddenly, the air traffic controllers in New York realized that Pan Am Flight 914 was not sending out any signal. They couldn't find its location, and there was no response on the communication devices. Time went by, and they connected with the Miami airport staff. To their shock, the flight had not landed. Neither of the airports, or any airport for that matter, have received a distress signal from Flight 914. Even if they crashed, the pilots would have been able to send out some sort of signal before the systems failed. Everyone was now in a state of panic. Families started questioning the authorities on where their loved ones were. The airport controllers were trying desperately to establish any sort of communication in the aircraft. There was no other conclusion. Flight 914 must have crashed. Since there were no sightings of a plane crash reported, the plane must have gone down over the ocean. The flight route went above the Atlantic Ocean and investigations began in search of the missing aircraft. Coast Guards were alerted and rescue teams went out for days in search of some hope. They were hoping to find a survivor or at least some clue as to what happened to Flight 914. The days went by and it seemed like the plane had just vanished into thin air. The authorities had no choice but to report Flight 914 as crashed. Since no one was found, alive or dead, and since it was unlikely that anyone had survived for so long, they declared all the passengers and the crew members as dead. The grieving families got no explanations to their pressing questions. The airline compensated them with death benefits and the families buried empty coffins. Flight 914 had come to a tragic end, or so everyone thought. Fast forward to September 9th, 1992. In Caracas Airport in Venezuela, it was just another busy day, much like what it had been 37 years ago in New York. Air traffic controller Juan de la Corte was at his usual work, monitoring the landing and taking off of flights. He and his team had no idea of the strange events the day would unfold. Out of the blue, an aircraft appeared on the airport's radar. Juan checked the flight schedules. What was the flight? It was not something that was planned. Maybe it was an emergency landing. Well, following protocols, Juan made arrangements for the strange plane to land while trying to establish communication with it. With little effort, he managed to get in contact with the captain. The captain's first questions completely threw Juan off guard. "Where are we?" the pilot asked. Juan was speechless for a few seconds. He then replied to the plane that had reached Caracas, Venezuela. Now, it was the captain's turn to be shocked. Juan decided to dig a little further. After a while, the captain said, "We are Pan American Airways Flight 914 from New York to Miami, with a crew of 4 and 57 passengers." What on earth was a flight to Miami doing more than 1,000 kilometers off course? Even if it was an emergency, what was it doing coming all the way to Venezuela? Whatever the situation, it was a plane carrying civilian passengers. Juan asked to clear the runway for the plane to land safely. Questions could be asked later. His priority right now was getting the passengers to safety. As the plane drew closer, everyone started to realize that something was not right. The plane that was approaching them was a model that was rarely in use as commercial aircrafts. It was a very old model, a DC-4 McDonnell Douglas passenger aircraft. It was so old that it was still run on propellers instead of the more modern turbine engines. Everyone was perplexed as the aircraft landed. It was shocking as to how outdated it was. As Juan explained, the plane appeared rugged. It looked like it had been through hell and back. It was a miracle that it was even running so smoothly. Just to be safe, Juan called for extra assistance from the ground staff. He didn't know if the passengers were injured or even alive, judging by the look of the aircraft. As the airport crew surrounded the plane, Juan resumed his conversation with the pilot. We were scheduled to land in Miami at 9:55 a.m. on the 2nd of July, 1955. The pilot continued giving details casually. Juan stopped dead in his tracks. Was this some sort of prank? Or had the pilot completely lost his mind? Juan checked the date just to be sure. The pilot was now wondering why Juan suddenly went silent. Cautiously, Juan told the pilot that it was September 9th, 1992. The line on the other end went dead silent. As Juan started to wonder whether he'd made a mistake by telling the date, he heard the sounds of panic. Oh my god. The pilot was in a fit, and Juan could hear that there were others starting to panic as well. Juan quickly requested a group of security guards. Juan waited for the passengers and the crew to be safely taken out of the plane. Once they were outside, they could be questioned and this mystery could be solved. But the pilot had other plans. In the middle of all the mayhem, he screamed out, "No, do not get near, we are leaving now!" Juan tried desperately to reason with the pilot, but he would not hear another word. He turned the plane back onto the runway and took off before anyone could stop him. Once in the clouds, the plane was once again untraceable through radar. As the story goes, this flight landed in Miami a few hours after leaving Caracas. The airport staff in Miami were even more shocked. It was as if a ghost flight had landed. All the people in this aircraft were deemed dead, and now here they were, alive and well. They did a background check and confirmed that it was indeed the plane that disappeared mysteriously 37 years ago. And this is where things get really bizarre. Apparently the passengers were safe and sound, but they hadn't aged a day during their time in the air. They looked as exactly they had done 37 years ago. The families were relieved that the passengers were unharmed, but while the rest of the world aged at a normal rate, the passengers were just the way they were 37 years ago. Eventually, the passengers and the crew were allowed to go home. No one knew or remembered what had happened to them on their 37-year-long flight. The authorities could get no information, even out of the pilot, since he had no idea that he'd been steering a plane for all that time. Finding this story hard to believe? Yeah, most people believe this story to be a hoax, especially given the reputation of the paper. Weekly World News was an infamous tabloid back then for publishing all sorts of fabricated stories with doctored images like fake giant skeletons, time travelers, and a man who sued himself after hitting himself with a boomerang. World News Weekly published his story a few more times, but the photo of the so-called eyewitness, Juan, changed twice during the publications. And this wasn't the only contradictions between the articles. Besides, not even the photo of the aircraft was real. It was simply a stock photograph of a plane of the same model as the Pan Am aircraft from a site called Alamy. The fact that no credible newspaper had reported this incident didn't do much to benefit the believability either. Besides, this story raised too many questions. How did a plane run for so long without food for the passengers or without any fuel? And how on earth did the passengers not age or the pilot have no idea that 37 years had passed? The only remotely credible piece of information was a 1995 classic birch pocket calendar. Apparently, while Juan was trying to reason with the passengers, and just before the pilot drove away, he accidentally dropped his pocket calendar. Some theories suggested that the plane had entered some sort of time-traveling zone. Another theory is that the infamous Bermuda Triangle had something to do with the plane's disappearance. Many flights had in fact disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle. What do you think happened? Let us know your theories in the comments down below, and remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos. Thank you for watching, and see you all next time.